Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. Today we have a very special guest, Jason Bartlett, who's a state representative from District Number 2, which encompasses parts of Bethel, Reading, and Danbury. We're going to talk principally about the educational initiative that came out of the Black and Hispanic Caucus, which is what Jason is part of. But Jason, first of all, tell our audience where you are in education, what your background is in terms of being part of this issue.
Well, I've been on the Education Committee since I was first elected. And really, education has been my number one issue in terms of research and advocacy. It's partially how I got elected in the first place. In Bethel, we had a huge education fight over the high school and just empowering our kids and parents. And we kind of brought that passion to Hartford in terms of looking out for the 2nd District, in terms of just bettering education here in the state of Connecticut. We used to be often number 1 in all categories across the board, and we have not been as innovative and not been as progressive in terms of staying with educational issues and making sure that we have excellence in education. So that's where I've spent a great deal of my time. My first term, I got a landmark bill through the legislature. I had to petition the bill out of the Education Committee, and that was raising the age from 16. It originally was 18, and I compromised at 17 before a kid could quit school.
Now, you say petition. Is that a parliamentary maneuver to actually get something out of a committee when some of the people in the committee would like to, let's say, stall it?
Well, it's not some of the people, it's the chairs.
Mm-hmm.
They would not raise my bill for a vote. So we had a public hearing, and they would not allow the committee to vote on the bill. So it's like, I forgot what that cartoon was, how a bill becomes a law.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remember, there's a little way to get around the chairs, and that's called petitioning. So I had to go and get 76 signatures from my colleagues in the House and petition the bill out of committee and to get my colleagues to agree that we should vote as a body on that piece of legislation, and that's what I did. It was the first time in 20 years that a bill was petitioned out of a committee and actually became a law. And so the House voted on it. We got like 132 votes in the House. It originally died in the Senate during the regular session, and I brought it back again through the budget implementer, and again ran the bill through the education implementation bill. We ran that again. It made its way through the Senate actually first, and then came down to the House, and we passed it. So it took a long, arduous route. A lot of people were watching because it was such an unusual way to get legislation passed, because people were saying, my career was over, I was never going to get a bill through, and it actually became law. So now we have a law that says you can't quit school until you're 17 years old, and it really needs to move up to 18, but I'm happy with at least getting it there, because there's not a kid. 17-year-olds are still kids as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
They're not adults. They should not be quitting school. And, it only hurts our economy to have high school dropouts. And so, I said, what's the next step from there? And the next step to me was addressing the achievement gap that we have in the state of Connecticut and Danbury.
So you got, before you go on, so you got an up or down vote on a bill that obviously once it got its up or down vote, it sailed right through, but may not have even gotten to that, would not have even gotten to that point without that parliamentary maneuver around the chairs of I'm presuming
education.
Both parties, the chairs of both parties.
Well, there's only chairs of one party, which is the Democrats run the legislature. So all the chairs in the Senate and the House are Democrats.
Oh, okay.
So the House chair and the Senate chair, they have to agree for one thing to allow for a vote, and they worked against it. And the reason was they said it was going to cost too much money, and I just couldn't understand that, thinking that it costs too much money to keep a kid in school. That didn't seem right to me.
Seems odd. Now, you were mentioning about the initiative in Danbury that's come since then.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've learned being on the Education Committee, and just actually it's becoming a national phenomena, is that black, Latino, and poor urban white kids are about 30% behind when we do our testing. So to me, that's just a tragedy, and I don't see it as an excuse. One of the things that you'll hear from Bethel residents, Danbury residents, and Reading too, is, you know, we're pouring all this money into the cities and spending all this money in education, but we're not getting the results, right? So I hear that. And I think that, you know, it's my job to be responsible to that feeling. So if my taxpayers are, you know, our tax dollars are going into Hartford and then they're going into a city and we're not getting our money, then it really is incumbent upon me to make the system work and to look for the kinds of reforms so that, first of all our kids get educated, and second of all, our taxpayers are getting their money's worth, right? So we've come up with a bill that addresses just that. It tries to bring accountability into the education system. It calls for systematic changes in terms of how we educate our kids. And it's going to raise our standards for everybody so that we begin to get the kind of results that we're trying to get in education. So it's a huge, comprehensive bill.
Now, when you say accountability, we hear a lot about accountability being placed on educators, and sometimes accountability being placed on students. Does this bill talk more about accountability on students than on anyone else within the system?
No, I would say it calls for accountability on the system. Okay. So, you know, students are our consumer, and we're trying to get some achievement, some academic progress, and make sure that from 3 to 4 that they can read when they finish 3rd grade, that they're ready there, and then so on and so forth throughout the system. So the accountability is really going towards parents, going towards teachers, and going towards administrators, and also the Commissioner of Education, us as legislators. Every stakeholder needs to be accountable to make sure that when that kid graduates high school, he's not going to college and then has to take remediation courses. You know, it's a big phenomenon. Either they're not making it through, or all our kids that were graduating, we're now spending thousands of dollars to remediate them after they've received a secondary education. So the accountability is at all those levels, and there's a piece, I think, in there for each one of those stakeholders that are supposedly they're supposed to be educating our kids.
So if you're spending the money after the fact, after they graduate, for remediation, how would it not be a savings to keep them in school a little bit longer and get that remediation while they're still fresh in the educational system?
David, there's no doubt about it. We spend more money by not educating kids and by not taking those second steps because our kids end up incarcerated, or they end up on welfare. You know, on the high school bill, in terms of raising the age, we found out in the Connecticut prison population that it was like 60% did not have a high school diploma. We found out that 45% of the people who are receiving TANF, food stamps, and those kinds of social services, 45% do not have a high school diploma. So in the end, we're going to pay. And this has been shown nationally too. So it makes more sense to do some of the reform that we need to do so that we're not paying in the end. And actually, most of the proposals that I'm putting forward, they don't have a price tag. These are some common sense reforms that do not cost money, quite frankly.
Improvements that don't cost money. What a concept. What does a year in prison cost relative to an extra year in high school?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
I think it's maybe $50,000.
But I know we're spending over $100 million on our prisons.
I think it's like $50,000 a year to keep someone incarcerated, whether it be in a county jail or in a all the way to a maximum security prison. It averages $50,000 a year. Now, a year of education can't cost more than just a slight fraction of that.
Well,
Must
I
be
mean,
a huge gap.
the national average that we spend on kids is $9,000, about $9,000, and in Connecticut, our average per pupil is about 14.
Yeah.
So we actually spend more money per pupil than the national average, but I would maintain that we're not getting our money's worth in terms of that kind of investment, which is why we wanted to address this issue, because it's not for lack of spending money. And that's why our proposals are not, we're not asking to go from 14 to 16. We're not doing that. We're asking to spend the money that we're spending and do it in a way that makes the most sense and brings accountability and gets better results. We have to look at what we're spending, and we got to make some reforms, systematic reforms.
Well, it's my contention, and I think libertarians are with me on this, is that it's not so much that you're paying tax dollars and you're getting something back for it, but if you know that you're paying your dollars in from somewhere, and you know exactly where that money is being spent and how it's being used, and if it's being used efficiently, then that's government doing the right thing. That's government spending our money efficiently, wisely, and in a way that makes sense to everybody, even people that are not so keen on government in any sense of the word. But now you mentioned about I read the article, and it mentioned advanced placement courses in inner city schools. And why in the world would you put advanced placement courses in inner city schools with kids that are failing? What can you achieve from that?
Well, first of all, I think that you have to start from a point of kids can achieve, and that we shouldn't be tracking kids. So we should always raise our expectations, So that's where I start from. And when you get into the AP is a part of this bill, advanced placement. And the reason why it's important is, for starters, if you graduate from Danbury and you graduate from Reading, and I'm a college administrator, I might look at those two diplomas a little differently.
How so?
Well, because I might say Danbury doesn't have as good a school system as Reading, Connecticut. That's how so, because I know that Reading is either 1, 2, 3, or 4, and Danbury, is not at the level of Reading in terms of money spent and just in terms of consumer reports and that whole kind of thing. So I might be biased. Let's just assume for a second that I am. And if I am a student at Danbury High, and I take an AP course, and I score a 4 or a 5 on my AP, and I'm a student at Reading, and I do the same, guess what? Danbury students are on the same level as Reading, and it's the same for Bridgeport and Hartford, New Britain, and everywhere else. So AP is the neutralizer. An advanced placement course is a neutralizer, and if I take that going into college, I'm on the same level as Ridgefield and Westport and New Canaan in terms of graduating and coming out of a high school. So that's number one, why it's so important. It also is a great indicator of how well you're going to do in college. So if you get into advanced placement in high school and you do well, you get a 3, 4, or 5, it is an indicator that you will actually get into college and you will actually finish college. So it's extremely important.
So you'll actually have learned how to... I've always felt like, and I was an educator for 3 years in Florida, and I taught Title I reading, and I always felt like that if you put a heavy burden on kids, that even kids that had traditionally not done well, if you put a heavy burden on their shoulders, that they would perform and they would come out of this feeling of I'm worthless, or I'm not as good as the other kids, and they'd get a great sense of worth.
Well, there's that, and you know what else there is we're saying if you take the PSAT in 10th grade and you're a C+ student, and the PSAT will indicate that you can actually perform at a higher level because you have the intelligence, but you're not doing the work. So what we're saying is, let's grab a bunch of those kids that are intelligent, they score very high, but they're not doing the work, and let's get them into advanced placement where that expectation is higher, and then let's give them some supportive services, and then let's give them the encouragement. Let's get the parents to buy in so that they can make it through that class, and then what we're looking for is going to happen. The achievement's going to happen. And that's really what we want every school. We don't want it to be for the elites. It's not for, AP should not be for the elites. And if you look at the front page of the News Times today, you'll see that the principal of Danbury High School has actually heard this argument from myself and others, and he is now coming out and saying, we're not going to have AP be for elites. We're going to open up advanced placement, and a lot more kids are going to go in, and we're going to, as a school, give the supportive services that these kids need to begin to achieve. So that's an aspect in the bill. We want that done across the state of Connecticut, and I think that that's going to be a very popular piece in the bill.
Now, all kids, in my estimation, and as I say, I taught kids that were at least 4 grade levels behind their chronological age and saw some amazing things out of them. I think every kid has the potential for being a genius. Sometimes they have to find a little different way through the educational system, a little different way of learning a subject to get it. So it's good to give them that backup, good to put those high expectations
It's called
on them.
Alternative options. Everybody doesn't learn the same, okay? Yeah. I'm more for choices. I think as a parent, we need to have choices. And we've brought that into the bill because we've said that schools need to have online. Okay, that is something that is coming out. We're in other states they're much more advanced. We've got a section of the bill that says that that schools need to offer online for credit recovery. So there's 2 pieces to online. One is we don't have Mandarin Chinese in Bethel or Danbury that I know of. So you could get an online course for $300 through Charter Oak College here in the state of Connecticut. Get credit for that and go through it and online and learn Mandarin Chinese. Our parents in Bethel and Danbury and Reading should have the option of having their kids, if they're interested, take those kinds of courses. In addition, instead of holding kids down when they start, like say they have a crisis in 10th grade, and at the end of 10th grade, maybe the parents were getting divorced or something and things are better. Yeah. But now I've lost a whole semester and now I've lost a whole year. Yeah. So now I'm in danger of not graduating. Well, the schools should be assisting those kids and saying, look, instead of you coming back for the extra year, which we know you're not going to do, and we're going to spend, $10,000 to $15,000 for you to do that, how about we help you and allow you to take some online courses where you can do credit recovery and you can catch up to the rest of your grade. And that is in the bill. So that's another systems change and we have to get our high schools and our school systems to adopt those kinds of approaches.
And kids can take courses, they can take their classes when they're out sick for a day or a week or a month or a period of time. They really, in fact, won't miss their class. Now, as a realtor, I've noticed that a lot of buyers have chosen Danbury over the smaller towns around. One simple reason. Danbury is a big school system. It has a lot of choices in terms of languages, in terms of music programs, and a lot of parents know they can't find those programs, so historically haven't been able to find those programs in the small towns, but they can find them in the Danbury school system, and because of that, they've chosen Danbury. Now, what you're saying is essentially the same thing, where if towns are allowed, or if kids are allowed those options that they would get in, let's see, if a Bethel kid could get a class that he couldn't get other than being in the Danbury school systems, it doesn't matter whether it's in Bethel or Danbury. You can get, you have access to everything.
We definitely
regardless.
need more choices in this area, for sure. I agree. I think maybe it was the News Times that called on Bethel to allow their students to attend the magnet school, the International Magnet School in Danbury. I've been saying this for years, that why are we not allowing kids? I think when it originally came up, the Board of Ed was scared somehow that there would have to be reciprocation and we'd have to take Danbury kids or something like that, which is ridiculous. But, Bethel kids should have more options. Danbury kids should have more options. Danbury High School is a big school. A lot of kids, it's like the largest in the state.
Second largest. Behind New Britain.
And, when I go door knocking in Danbury, they're like, it's like going to a college campus. That's how the kids feel. So one of the things that I think that's happening there now is they're looking at new curricula to allow for academies, so that, you know, if you're interested in, let's say, medical, you know, you can go through that. And that's one of the things we're trying to do on a state level too, is, you know, tie that into, you know, if you want to do medical, maybe you can do some CNA, or you could do some nursing, so that you could be part of the labor force immediately after high school. And then if you want to go to community college or another route, that you have some skills and some curricula that's going to support that immediately. So that's the direction that I think
chance of success when you go into those things, because you've already got your feet wet, so to speak.
Right. Well, in this economy, we've got to develop ways to keep educating our workforce and to keep engaging folks. Not everyone will be on a college track. You know, we had the film tax credit that we did in the state.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why that wasn't as successful as it should have been is we haven't been able to take advantage of our labor force in the state of Connecticut. They were actually bringing folks from New York and bringing folks from other states to do sound and to do lighting and to do the kinds of things that they needed on those movies. So we have to be intelligent about growing our labor force, and you know, that's another, you know, piece that, you know, I'm very interested in.
And apparently adapting it to adapting the labor force, the upcoming labor force, to the projected jobs here in Connecticut, so kids can actually stay here in Connecticut and not have to migrate somewhere else because their skill set doesn't match what's available here in Connecticut to work.
That's right.
And one more thing for the audience. The whole idea of learning being a lifetime objective. When you stop learning, you start dying. So learning throughout your life is just so very important.
It is. And I'm still learning. You know, we're still learning up at the Capitol, and, you know, trying on this effort. Yesterday, I went to Harding High School, which is in Bridgeport, and did a tour of a failing school. And it was a learning experience because, you know, they were doing, I was in the hall and they're doing sweeps, and I said, well, what is a sweep? And basically it was 3 security guards, you know, forming a line and basically pushing kids into the class. And it was a very kind of, you know, interesting experience to watch that, and then, you know, to talk to the students afterwards and to talk about the security and the fact that they don't feel safe in the school, and the fact that, you know, the security isn't trained, you know, and they're dealing with kids. So, you know, I, as a legislator, am trying to visit. I'll be at the Danbury Board of Ed tonight talking about advanced placement and just going into all the school systems. We met with the teachers this last weekend to talk about their issue. We're trying to advance student evaluations, student academic performance with teacher evaluation. So there's an entire discussion with that as part of Obama's Race to the Top, where we're trying to get federal monies to help our schools, which Danbury would be one recipient of that. That's the #1 component, is linking student academic progress to student evaluations, which is another piece of this bill that we're pushing.
That idea of sweeps in the school, it almost sounds like a warm-up for prison. I mean, isn't that what they do in prison? I mean, you have the prison guards that herd prisoners from one spot to another. And it almost feels like, it sounds like it's a warm-up for that. Like they're telling the kids that but we know you're going to be in prison, so we're going to treat you like you're one day going to be in prison.
Well, I mean, it's a delicate balance, because one, you have to have order and structure in your school, and two, you know, how do you make that happen? And I have to say, I want to do some more research, because I don't think what they're doing right now is right, but I don't want to sit here and critique it without looking at other models. You
have to have something to replace it with before you can get rid of it. You've got to get something.
And I'm not sure that that's been done in some of these failing schools, and I don't think we've taken security strong enough. I mean, you know, it's a huge issue, and you can't have a learning environment if people aren't feeling safe. And so that's where I feel like some of these schools need to start. You don't like it, huh? You're uncomfortable too, but you get
I do
the dilemma.
I do recognize that you have to have something, even if you have something that you recognize is inherently wrong, you really need to have something to replace it before you can take the one thing out of the way. You better think through what you're doing.
What I didn't like was the security officers in that school were a couple years older than the kids, and they actually were using curse words, that I heard, and I asked the students and the people in the building, and said, yeah. And so there's no training, and that's, professional development for teachers is real important. Professional development for security is real important. You just can't be put in a situation and not be prepared for it. And one of the things I hear all the time is professional development, professional development. The real pushback with the superintendent, he wanted to shorten the school year by 10 days and take all of the professional development out. And I think that's totally the wrong approach. You've got to have professional development. You mentioned multi-ethnicities in Danbury. We are multi-ethnicities in Bethel, too. Bethel's actually done a very good job in terms of addressing that. And one of the reasons why is because they've had the professional development. They've had the teachers go through that. In Danbury, there needs to be more of that, not less. Because first of all, they have a much greater concentration of different ethnicities and more languages. They have real challenges in that area. So I'm not one to say, oh, let's save money. As Senator McLaughlin, my colleague in the Senate, he wants to just go along with that. That is a terrible idea. And we have to give our teachers the resources to be able to do what we ask them to do, because teaching is more now than just teaching a classroom. I mean, there's a whole continuum of things that we're asking teachers and administrators to do today.
We're down to our last minute. Summarize what you've talked about. Add anything you want to add in at this point.
Well, I just think that there are some systematic things that we can do to reform education to make Connecticut able to get Race to the Top funds. We're talking about $200 million from the feds, and that's just that one area. This is going to be an ongoing discussion, and I welcome people to email me and to give me their ideas, because we spend a lot of money on education, and we need to get the kinds of result we need. Excellence in our schools, in all our schools. Reading is a great school. Bethel is a great school. Danbury is a great school system too, and we just need to bring it up one more notch.
Okay, we have to say goodbye. We'll have you back for another show. This has been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Jason Bartlett's been my guest. Thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you, sir.